Action, and welcome everybody. This is PnP Weekly, episode 183. It is true.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Thank you for putting that on the meeting invite, Waldek. It is 17th of October, 2022. In the PnP Weekly, I always talk about. Oh, that's right. My name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm a product manager in the Microsoft 365 platform areas, and with me as a co-host is
Hi everybody, my name is Waldek Mastygas and I am Cloud Developer Advocate for Microsoft 365 at Microsoft.
Excellent. And in PnP Weekly, I always talk about the latest, what's happening in Microsoft 365 areas, which is a lot last week because of the Ignite conference. And there was like a gajillion of news and announcements and upcoming features and all of that stuff. We'll go through some of them, but focus on just overlaying because there would be like 80 whatever blog posts to go through them all up. And then we'll have Paolo Pialorsi joining us for a discussion on what he's been up to. Paolo is a well-known community member, been active in the community areas and open source for years. I think we counted 9 years or so with the platform community, which is pretty cool. So, but good discussion related on community and his experiences on the Microsoft 365 cloud, but not only on Microsoft 365 cloud, which is actually really interesting as well. So it's good to catch up with him as well. Anything else? Hashtag PnP Weekly on the Twitter, so we know what you are writing. The awesome stuff what community is writing. We're always interested on that. I guess that's it. Anything?
So without further ado, let's jump into the interview with Paolo.
Let's do that. Excellent. Welcome, Paolo, on joining us on the PnP Weekly episode 183. It's been actually a while since you've been in the show. I think it was more than a year ago already, if I'm counting the numbers correctly.
Yes.
Waldek is nodding.
It's been 84 years, yes.
It's been 84 years. Now,
84
so let's
episodes now.
Yeah, but before we go, what's happening right now and what you've been doing recently? Can you do a quick intro for those who do not know who's Paolo?
Yes. First of all, thanks for having me. I'm Paolo Pialorsi. I'm a solution architect. I work in a company of my own. It is based in Italy and in the US, and I mainly support customers or enterprise customers or ISVs to build solutions, customization solutions on top of Microsoft 365. That's my life.
How did you get to be that? What's your background?
Well, I started quite early on the Microsoft technologies.
I'm an architect. Last time you were, by the way, a senior consultant, I remember.
Yeah. I self-blessed myself like everybody else does.
On Monday, he is an architect. On Tuesday,
yes. Precisely. Working in a company of my own, I can bless myself with whatever title I like. But seriously, seriously, when I started quite early on working on Microsoft technologies and building and defining the architecture of solutions. I used to call myself in the past a senior consultant only because at the very end, what I do is providing consulting services to customers. But at the very end, I see that nowadays I mainly define the architecture of solutions. So why not upgrading my title? That's the idea.
Yeah, makes perfect sense.
So you mentioned that you build applications on M365, and that's a really broad field. So what kind of apps do you actually build?
Well, we mainly build and define solutions on top of SharePoint Online, Microsoft Teams, Viva, and that kind of area. So not everything in Microsoft 365, because it would be almost impossible to know everything, but we are fully focused on that area. And generally speaking, we help customers build a solution for managing their content, their documents, their work processes and flows and stuff like that. So we also use the Power Platform every now and then under the cover of our solutions, but not necessarily. We also rely a lot on Azure. So even if I don't sell myself as an Azure expert, I do quite some stuff on Azure and Azure Logic Apps, Azure Functions, Azure AD indeed, so all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So we have fun
it's
with
pretty
that.
unavoidable, right? With Microsoft 365, Azure comes
So
as a...
in a way, you mentioned everything anyway.
Funny enough, I have something to share with you. I don't know if it is the right place to do that, but for example, last month we have built a solution for a customer who was willing to use Microsoft 365 as the front-end framework, let me say, or platform, but was also willing to use another cloud platform in the backend, which is totally doable. So they wanted to use AWS, and I have to say that I'm quite happy because nowadays technology is so open that you can easily build a solution on top of the Microsoft 365 platform with a backend partially running on a completely different offering and technology. And I think this is the beauty of technology nowadays.
Yeah.
So you bring up an interesting point. Like, how does that? Are there any caveats that you have to take into account when you integrate with M365, which is one thing, you host your code and everything that works on another cloud, and you want to bridge the gap? Like, does that just work? Or are you really like stretching it and need to, do some additional hoops basically to get from one cloud to another?
Well, honestly, I was expecting to struggle more, which wasn't the case. So I'm happy. I'm happy with that. I mean, we use the Microsoft Graph SDK to use Microsoft Graph. We use the MSAL library for authentication. We basically built some Lambda in AWS, which is the counterpart of an Azure function on the Azure side. And basically, with a properly designed architecture under the cover of the solution, we were just able to slightly change the layer that we use to host the code. But at the very end, we did almost the same that we do when we work in Azure. So I'm happy with that. Yeah.
Now, this is actually a really interesting discussion point as well. But I can imagine that authentication was the at least the first hurdle. How is that working? Because the Azure Active Directory is obviously the authentication provider within Microsoft 365, but then in AWS, how would that work?
As you said, Azure AD was and is the authentication provider, and we still rely on that service for the authentication part. So we are hosting the functions or the Lambdas on the AWS side, but we use MSAL and Azure AD to get an access token, to consume Microsoft Graph, and all that kind of stuff. So it was quite clean and easy again. And I don't want to stress too much this information, but I mean, I'm happy because I was expecting a worse experience,
Yeah. But it is actually interesting. It's also the maturity of the cloud. Right? Yeah. So.
Exactly, and I mean that makes sense. Like, as I think that the challenging part is if you like to imagine the building blocks that you actually need and where do they fit across the multi-cloud setup, right? Because like you said, you have M365, you have your code, but then what about auth, right? Like auth doesn't belong, like in theory, you would say, well, there's a part of auth that belongs to your code with MSAL getting tokens, refreshing the tokens, but where do you get them from? Well, you get them from AAD that is kind of married to your M365 tenant where you have your app reg. Right, so it's a really multi-cloud thing with pieces across the both clouds, but then you can just tie them together perfectly fine, apparently.
Yeah, and that's what I love of my work, to be fair.
To be able to play with the different things, yeah. Basically, you learn something new every day, right?
Oh, definitely. That's my job role. Learning something, learning every single day, learning. If you don't learn, you are dead.
And also, of course, teaching, because you're quite often in the conferences and presenting your knowledge for others. So that's actually highly beneficial. So it's not just for you to learn, but also teaching others. So yeah.
Speaking of which, right, you've just been to an event and you talked about something. What was it about?
Well, yes, I spent the weekend in Brussels with a bunch of community friends for the Collab Days Belgium 2022. I had a speech about, well, the title is quite weird. It was Becoming a Microsoft Graph Ninja or something like that. Yeah, and the idea was to provide an advanced session about Microsoft Graph rather than an introduction of Microsoft Graph. Because, Microsoft Graph has been around for a while already. So we said, why not trying to cover something more advanced? So first of all, I decided to cover the authentication and authorization part of the story, which should actually be at the basis of consuming Microsoft Graph, but we see on a daily basis that it is what the developers struggle the most. So I decided to try to help. I don't know if I made it, but at least I tried to explain them how you can go through the different grant flows that you have in order to get a token, an access token to consume Graph, and what can be an access token, what can you have from a permission scope point of view inside an access token. So delegated permissions, application permissions, and all that kind of stuff, including the grant of the permission. So I did my best to explain all this part of the story. And then we moved to the frothing, which is another topic that you should know if you want to work properly with Graph, and batching, which can be really beneficial if you want to work in a proper way against throttling in or while consuming Microsoft Graph. And then we ended up with some other advanced topics like Microsoft Graph webhooks and notifications and the extensibility model of entities in Azure AD. So that was the session. It was a busy one, a bit of a rush, but I think people were happy at the end. I hope so. Yeah.
How many? How was the attendance on the conference? So,
well, the conference I think was well attended. They said they had something like 300 registered people and just few no shows. So they were happy, and it was a nice conference. Yeah. Well done.
And last week in general has been a really, really busy week with Ignite and Princeton, the Collab Summit, North America, South Coast Summit, this one, and more conferences to come. So clearly we're heading to a direction where people want to be more in person, which is really, really cool. So there's a lot of events coming still.
That wasn't never the case that people didn't want to be in person.
True.
They weren't allowed to, or there was a high risk. But I still think the craving for folks to meet, like, that has been there always, right? Because if there's one thing that we have in community in M365 is this passionate group of folks who want to learn, who want to share their experience, who want to meet others. I think that hasn't been away for the last 2 years. It was just, due to everything else around us, extra hard to get that done. And we tried to, mimic that with virtual events and other things. But now that we can get in person, I think that's exactly what we see, right?
Well, oh, sorry.
No.
Okay. Oh, I was just saying that I didn't say that, but indeed it was really amazing to be back in person. And just to make an example, I was really happy because I was able to meet a couple of community people, and we spent a few minutes together talking about the community stuff that we do in PnP. I was able to share some information about how to work in the PnP framework library with one of our colleagues in the PnP team and stuff like that. So that's what we were literally missing while we were missing the in-person experience. So
and it's interesting to see it's understandable that people want to have that in-person experience, and then it's interesting to see now within upcoming years what will happen with the hybrid conferences, and will that be still a thing? My prediction is that it's actually no, because the conferences have such a different, let's say, role and a meaning if they're hybrid versus if they're in person. So, but we'll see. It's interesting to see.
But that is an interesting point, right? Because if there's one thing that we hear from folks say time and again, is that the most valuable part that they or at least some folks, right? The most valuable part that they get from the event is the hallway track. Ad hoc discussions that they get with people that they meet, about everything from basically getting to know each other as people to things related to work. And if there's one thing that is really probably the hardest to replicate online, it's the hallway track, because there is it's not a talk. You get people to a room and there's one person that speaks and everybody else listen. It's like, how do you create it? And I think we still haven't found good way for us to replicate that experience online.
True. You could always have those rooms and isolated things, but it's not the same. It's just isn't the same thing. To be fair, I think one thing what's actually interesting, let's talk about the community and open source in a second. You mentioned the PnP, and we need to clarify a bit on there. But even in those, it's interesting to see that as we started to have 10-minute discussions before the calls, we start to see more and more people joining those random discussions. So people kind of book extra time before the community calls, on a weekly community calls, to join a few minutes early and have that hallway discussion before we go to the actual agenda. It's been actually working surprisingly well. Should book even maybe more time to be present, maybe 15 minutes before.
Which is an interesting point, because like, how would you mimic that experience? Like, would it be like you can join the meeting with a few minutes ahead of time, and then basically split people in the rooms, like, hey, do we have two folks talking about this? We have four people talking about that. And then you basically can join, and as discussion evolves, the subject evolves as well, right? So it might be this interesting thing, like maybe to replicate that.
That's a really hard thing to replicate. Plus the fact that then whenever the meeting actually starts, you would be like, okay, so everybody back here. So, but it's trying to mimic the situation. Exactly.
We are 2 minutes to the session.
The community coffee, which is like a school break, between one course and another, something like that. Yeah.
But it's truly happen.
Those are the virtual coffees and everything else. They're kind of nice as well, but there's a challenge. If that group of people grows to be 50, 60, 70, 80, which are into coffee meetings, that does not scale and work. You would have to split it to a smaller room.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
It's an interesting, if somebody actually have experiences on how to do this in a scale, that would be a really interesting discussion point for sure. Now, Paolo, you mentioned PnP, you mentioned the community, you mentioned that. Can you talk about a bit of what's your background over there for those who would not know necessarily what you do? You're pretty well known about that community stuff.
You never know. So yes, I've been in the PnP community since I would say the very beginning, almost.
Just to clarify, PnP community, nowadays we call it Microsoft 365 platform community, and just for those who don't know what it is. So yes, PnP is a good abbreviation. So.
Yeah, I'm used to using the old and the original name, but yes, now we changed our name. But yeah,
because we need to change things, right? We're Microsoft, we're renaming things.
You change names every single day. Yes. So no, the PnP community is a community fully focused on sharing knowledge. It was originally based on the idea of sharing knowledge from developers for developers. Nowadays, we embrace much more than just developers. We embrace the Power Platform, so the makers. We embrace IT pros and all the other folks working in the IT area, generally speaking, which is good because we are growing. Well, I've been involved in the community, as I was saying, since the very beginning, and I started contributing to the PnP Sites Core library. At that point in time, that was the name, which was a .NET library to help SharePoint developers to easily build SharePoint on-premises and SharePoint Online solutions. Then this library evolved into the PnP framework and PnP Core SDK, and I'm still an active contributor for those two libraries, as well as many other projects in the community area. And specifically, I've been fully focused on the provisioning engine of PnP, which is the one we use nowadays to extract a template from a site or from a tenant, specifically talking about Microsoft Teams channels and Teams, as well as you can then, once you have extracted a template, you can apply that template onto another tenant or to another target environment. And this is really useful and convenient whenever you want to build solutions that we want to reuse, you want to resell to customers. So you design your solution on an environment, you extract it, and you reuse it wherever you like. And recently, we have introduced some new features in the provisioning engine. Now that you make me talk about it, Vesa. So, advertisement. We release new features. It is a free product, open source.
This show contains product placement.
Yeah, I'm not selling
open
anything.
Source product replacement. Yeah. So, but what are the new features? Just to recap on what you can do with the
Okay, let me see if I can recall all of them, but we introduced new features in the area of collapsible headers in modern pages in SharePoint Online. We introduced support for shared channels in Teams. We introduced new capabilities for provisioning lists and libraries with audience targeting, as well as what else? New features for document sets in SharePoint Online.
Yep.
And many other things, but those are the main that I recall right now. So we are growing on.
Always addressing the new features and capabilities. And I think that explaining that in a way that you were saying, that replicating the solution from one tenant to another is a good way of explaining that, because technically it creates a package which can be then applied, but stamped to another tenant, which is really, really cool for sure. Now, related actually on that work, you said that you're starting from the early days and from the start. I'm just thinking this because Waldek, I noticed that CLI will celebrate the 5 years within upcoming weeks. So congratulations on that. We'll break the 10-year on the overall community and PnP stuff within a year or so, but a bit over the year.
Wow.
So,
which is,
time flies. I guess we need to mark it on the same time when it went to the actual public. So Office, it was called Office App Model Samples. No.
OMS. AMS.
AMS.
Yeah.
AMS.
Adding model samples, I guess it was. I don't know, but anyway, we need to do some research.
AMS,
But we still have a 1 year time to do that research on history. So it's
time flies, remember.
That's true. That is true. Yes, but it's actually pretty cool that, and thank you, Paolo, for being part of that community and growing the community and helping others to be basically sharing their knowledge as well, because again, that's been the fundamental thinking point of the whole community, is just helping others to succeed. So rather than, it's really helping others to succeed and helping others to understand the ways of doing extensibility in Microsoft 365. So thank you for that.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Well, we're not having, but anyway, so it's all you. So voluntary pasting. Now, on other areas, so can we go back a bit on the, let's say, the status of what you're building for the Microsoft 365. So what kind of things, you talked about the architectural things, any technologies which you're explicitly using? Are you building Microsoft Teams applications and all of that, or what kind of things? Where's the demand?
Well, nowadays we have been mainly working on Teams and SharePoint Online solutions. So quite often we rely on SharePoint Framework as the framework for building such kind of solutions, so that we can reuse the same code base across the different workloads. At the same time, we also every now and then build Teams-only solutions for some of the customers, specifically if they want to have extensions like messaging extensions or search extensions in Teams. And as I said at the beginning, most of our customers want to have a better management and organization of their content, and they want to have a better reachability of their content. So, for example, recently we worked on a solution which required to customize the output of the search results, providing adaptive cards. And just to mix all of the topics in one answer, it was nice because we were able to build a solution for a customer, but we were also able to share the outcome with the whole community, because the customer was willing to have search results as adaptive cards, which is fine, and which was supported by the PnP search web parts. But they also wanted to have actionable cards. So they wanted to be able to click on the cards and do interaction. And so we extended the PnP modern search web parts to support that functionality. And this is something for the community, but it was literally paid by the customer, which is fine. And then we were able to provide the functionality to the customer as well. So this is the beauty of how you can leverage what you do in your daily work, and you can share it with the community and make a win-win for the community and for the customer.
Now, on that one, that's an interesting discussion point. Wouldn't the customer feel bad about paying for something which is now free for everybody else? So how do you deal with that expectation or setting the scene?
Well, there are customers who are smart. So they don't feel bad. Believe it or not, I'm just kidding. So I was completely clear with them. I said, okay, we need something which is not yet available. If you want, we can do that. It will take a bit, but at the very end, you will be happy. You will have what you are looking for, and the whole community will be able to contribute back. So in case there will be any additional need, it might be that someone else will improve what you are already relying on. So why not?
Yeah, and of course,
and also
the
flip,
customer
right?
customer got a lot of value already as a starting point from the community provided things. So basically,
right? So
paying
it goes really
back for that.
two ways, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's of course the beauty of a well-functioning open source community, and make it actually two ways, so people actually benefit out of that. How do you do that? The kind of things. What's the secret of PnP on these things? Now, why? Yes. What's Paolo? What is the secret? How does this work?
Well, you mean
it's kind of awkward for me and Waldek asked that from you as well. But what makes this the thing to work? So as an example, the search web part is a really good example. It's been used. It's by far the most widely used web part around the world, because we know from the unique ID what it's using, and then we're able to detect the usage worldwide. What's the secret? How does that be so successful, and some open source projects are not? So what would be the things? What would be, let's say, top 3 tips for you as a community leader to provide for other people to build open source things?
Well, I think the very first thing to do is to be completely open with the community. So share with them the plans, what you want to do, collect their feedback, and be reactive to their feedback. Because if you are at the top of a tower and you just look down to the people in the community saying, I'm the master, I make any choice and I will not listen to you, this is not a community, this is something else. So you have to be in the community and with the community, and you have to share your mind with the community. Then you have to make them feel engaged with the community. For example, in PnP, we provide the badges for what you do. So if you contribute to the community, we give you a badge to recognize your effort and that you were fundamental for the successful result that the community achieved. And that's another interesting point, in my opinion. And then, as I said, most of the professionals out there can benefit of the community. And so they even would feel bad if they would not give back to the community. So you can build your solution easily and quickly based on what the community gives you. Why not giving back? Come on. So
that's a human good way of that's the good way of being a good human, right? So giving back for those people who are giving value for you as well. So, and of course it's by choice, and people can still consume even though they wouldn't be able to contribute back, but it's a good way of thinking this. So taking care of each other, right?
Yeah.
And I think
and what was the next one, Waldek?
Yeah, so there's one more thing that I would add is value add, right? Like, you want to solve problem people have, because like you can build, the most interesting, intriguing, intricate thing, but if it doesn't solve a need someone has, like, why would they care, right? So I think one of the things that makes Tick, the things that we do in community, is that they're grounded in like real life problems people experience, or problems or needs people have when they build on M365, right? And as such, like, they're meaningful, they're solve needs, and then they kind of move the ladder up, meaning they allow people to start from that point as opposed to go all the way back and have to reinvent the wheel every single time they build, and everybody has to write the same code. Like, no, like, let's take care of basics, and then let people add value and solve the genuine unique problems that they have, as opposed to, no, the first thing we need to do is to authenticate, to get a token, or to be able to show a div on the page. Like, no, we've done that already so many times over the years. Here's a library you can use that does that already, and you can build on top of it.
Yep. Yeah. So it's the level setting of everybody. So making sure that everybody has the baseline features and functionalities and skill set, and then we can build on top of that. So, and that's actually the beauty of a long-term sustainable community, is that the level setting goes further up in the abstraction layer as well. So we basically help the community to build more elaborate solutions because the level setting is going higher on the abstraction layer. So, which is actually pretty cool.
And it all stands and falls on the influx of new ideas and feedback and improvements. Because if everybody would take, then you will kind of get, the what's it called? I think it's called the tragedy of a commons. Where you have a garden and everybody will take, but nobody will take care of the vegetables. Well, then it dies because there's it's just gone. Whereas here, like if there's influx of new thing and things are being maintained and kept up to date, and there are new improvements, new features, it just grows and evolves and becomes even more meaningful thing.
Yep, exactly. Provides even more value for everybody else, which is really, really cool. So cool. Now, from a timing perspective, let's be thoughtful in here. Paula, what's happening this week? Anything interesting? Now, are you all done with the conference season and you can just relax for the rest of the year? Because, there's only 2 months, 3.5 months.
This is just the beginning.
Christmas is here. Happy Christmas.
Yes, exactly.
I still have a couple of conferences. One will be the European SharePoint Conference in Copenhagen at the end of November. And then I will move straight from there to the US, to Vegas for the Microsoft 365 conference. And then I will be finally done. I love conferences, but still, I also love to stay some time at home,
Yeah. And anything specific on this week? What's on your agenda?
I will keep on working on the projects we are running for customers. So nothing special, but everything special, So
every one of them is special. Of course they are.
Yeah.
Every one of you.
There will be also a demo. I forgot it. There will be one demo in the SIG call on Thursday. So I will have a demo about the on behalf of flow within SharePoint Framework. So how to use the on behalf flow in a backend middleware API in order to consume, for example, Microsoft Graph in the backend of the middleware, and having SharePoint Framework consuming this middleware. So an interesting scenario which can be helpful.
What does that enable? So what is the thing, what it actually enables to do?
For example, it enables you to have a background process running on behalf of the user, not necessarily in real time through the front end. So if you want to start a process which will take a while, rather than running it client-side in the browser, when the user can close the browser and kill the process, you can just trigger it in the background and create a token which will allow this backend process to run on behalf of the user, just to make an example.
With the user's permission.
With the user permission, with the user identity and stuff like that. That's why it's actually on behalf of. Yeah, it is.
And you still mentioned the curse,
but not for now.
Yeah, exactly. You even mentioned the curse word token. You get the token. No,
I said token. No. Said the token.
Waldek, what's on your agenda?
What's on my agenda? So as we are progressing through the Hacktoberfest, we're getting more and more. We're getting a lot of PRs, which is really awesome in CLI for M365. So we're continuously doing work to try to review all of them on time so that folks who worked on them, get recognized on time. So that is a big thing that is currently in progress on my plate. What else? I'm thinking about a few different ways in which we can expose new folks who typically don't build on M365 to get them to know about Graph and what different things they can do with that, and in a way that we don't require them to do a PhD in auth first. So try to find a way that maybe within 5 to 10 minutes they can get to a working app that they build themselves without front loading thing like, hey, so we will build this app, but before you do, here is the Bible of auth at Microsoft. Like, no, let's not do that, and let's try to find different ways to go about it.
Somehow the tokens and auth is clearly the theme.
Well, it is really the prerequisite for anything that we do, right? Because like
True,
we build
true.
apps that are tied to APIs that aren't
Yes.
available anonymously,
Anonymously.
right? And
Yep, of
but
course.
before you get to them, well, you need to have a token. You need to have the keyword. So
Security is a requirement. So
Yes,
Yes.
yes, of course.
thanks God. I mean,
True, that is true. Now, on my side, I'm watching my calendar here. We have quite a few meetings, Waldek, with you on this week again, but that's a separate.
oh yes, we actually do. Yes.
But it's good. That's for partner interviews and discussions and research and all of that stuff, which is actually super interesting because we do we have a specific initiative with Waldek on collecting feedback across the world from different sides of partners related on how we can improve Microsoft 365, which is always interesting. Those are really good discussions. SharePoint Framework 1.16, I think the next beta is coming out this week. We should actually get that one out. I'm recording a lot of videos, well, that's the plan. Let's see. Videos related on Viva extensibility. So making sure that there's enough of information. What's the Viva story behind the scenes? So. Good. But let's see when we get all of those out. But the interesting looking calendar once again. Yes. So what happens for me, like what happened last week, is that whenever there's a wider whatever escalation or whatever thing, then I need to jump in and start coordinating. And I guess, well, I know a lot of people, which is fine, but it makes the planning of your week pretty hard because every single time there's a red bang thing and somebody needs to jump in. And then I guess it's the old consulting skills or whatever that you're able to coordinate and do communications and all of that stuff. So clearly, so that's why I'm always getting tracked on these things. So which is fine. It just makes the planning of your work a bit difficult. Cool. Anyway, so I guess that's it for now. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Waldek, for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. You
thank
all
you.
get
Thank
thanks.
you. Everybody gets thanks. Thank you.
Yes.
But thank you, Paula, for joining us. With Paula, we are seeing anyway multiple times in a week as well as we're planning always the community stuff. So this is kind of almost weird to do a recording with you.
Well, it is because we don't often get to talk about the different things that we actually do or the trends that we see or the past, the history, and it's really nice to to rehash that once in a while and be like, oh yeah, we used to do this. Like, I didn't know. Like, it's the first time I heard that you build things on Amazon, right? So that's like another interesting thing. Like, I didn't know. So, like, even though we could do,
are we still friends now?
Yes.
Are we still friends now?
Yes,
that I know that.
Of course. Because so there's also like, if there's one thing that I love of that has changed since the last, I don't know, 7, 8 years, like in the past at Microsoft, we were very much like, hey, if you want to do stuff with us, you got to be on Windows and you got to use VS. And that was it. Like, there was nothing else. Nowadays, we meet developers where they are. You're on
diversity.
Amazon. Perfect. You're on Linux. Excellent. You want to use Mac. Be my guest, right? So, like, it's irrelevant what technology you use. If there's anything that we can help in your stack, excellent.
And so as a bit longer time Microsoft employee, I love that because we're basically saying we come for you. We will help you regardless of your technical choices. We're not the Microsoft who will dictate and that this is what you need to do. No. We can help you regardless of your choices. So, and I love that mental mindset because it's completely different as it was. Well, back when I started at Microsoft, it was a mental mindset
ago.
84 years. I'm actually 98. It's
there you
just
go.
Kidding.
So you began at Microsoft when you were 6, yes?
Yes, of course. Yes. Anyway,
on that bombshell.
Thank you everybody for watching and listening. Please remember we have podcast, we have video version of this one, #BMP Weekly on the articles. So remember to cover them, and we'll find awesome stuff people are writing, which comes to the next step. So we'll jump on from the interview, going through the weekly articles. A lot of announcements in Ignite, which will not go through explicit all one by one, but still really cool stuff.
TLDR, the book of news.
Okay, yes, that's true. That is true. But thank you, Paolo, for joining, and thank you everybody for watching. And we'll jump into the articles. Cheers. Excellent. Thank you, Paolo, one more time. Really, really cool to catch up as well, and good to have you on the show. It's been quite a few weeks since last time you've been in the show, so really, really good. But let's actually jump on the weekly articles. And as we talked when we started the recording, there was a lot of announcements on the Ignite. So what would be your number one announcement, Waldek? Anything interesting was popular in your mind?
I think so. I would say two things. So for one, I like the announcement about new APIs for our team. So being able to access, the messages that are read, unread, and all of that, being able to get to the reactions, like basically all these new APIs that allow developers to build cooler apps, like apps that integrate more tightly with Teams and M365. Like that is really, really awesome, right? So that is one. And two, for a long time already, people would ask for app-only support for planner APIs, for migration scenarios, automation scenarios. They're coming. So there was another announcement about these APIs that they will now have app-only access, meaning, again, developers can build apps that require that app-only access. So these would be like two top-of-mind announcements for me.
Yeah.
What about you?
The planner one was really, really good. It's there's a lot of, let's say, finally we're getting this. Well, we didn't get it yet. We're getting it soon. So that was basically the it's coming in the latter part of this year. For me, obviously, the like you said, the graph stuff is really, really cool. I think there was a related announcements on how you can integrate those more efficiently with Azure Communication Services, and so those controls are basically making it easier as well.
Bring Teams to your app as opposed to show your app in
the Teams. That's actually really interesting.
Inside Teams,
I think it's an interesting way of approaching things as well. It enables people to take advantage of the Teams platform inside of their applications as well. So it's really, really cool. Of course, for us as a SPFX side, because a lot of the historical things from my work is on that side, big thing announcement was that you can now build Office Outlook and Microsoft 365 app extensibility with SharePoint Framework. So you can basically even further extend the SharePoint Framework solutions not to be just available in SharePoint and in Teams, but now also in Outlook and Office.com. So which is actually really cool as well.
Microsoft 365 app.
Sorry, so I did it again.
Maybe we need to, oops, you did it again. Maybe we need to spend a moment, right, to try to explain that a little, right? So at Ignite, we announced that the Office app, the experience, or so the app on your phone, the Office app, there's like one app to access lightweight version of Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and give you the ability to have like things like Office Lens where you can scan files and so on. So that app and the Office.com site, these two things are being now renamed Microsoft 365 app.
Yep.
So that is an important thing for you to keep in mind where you hear us talking about Microsoft 365 app, that is that specific experience, not the custom apps developers could build for Microsoft 365. It's the one specific tailored app that it was previously known as Office. Now it's the Microsoft 365 app.
Yeah. And that announcement makes sense when you explain it. But originally, when I saw the statement last week, which was Microsoft Office
without the context,
Office 365 is now Microsoft 365, and you're like, did somebody miss the memo, which we did already a few years ago? But
or even things like, so now your app will show in Outlook and Microsoft 365 app, and you are, wait, what? Microsoft 365 app will show in Microsoft 365 app? Like that doesn't. No, So it takes. Like the first time you hear it, you're like, say what? And then you're like, gotcha. It kind of makes sense, right? Because like we already renamed some of the Office 365 licenses to Microsoft 365 a few years back.
Sure.
And it kind of makes sense to align it across the board and have like more consistent story across the board and say this is Microsoft 365, including, like how users engage with it. Well, they engage with M365 through the Microsoft 365 app, which makes sense. And in that app, the things you build can also show in the same place, so that users who are already in the M365 app can use your work apps as well.
Yes, exactly. Super clear. Good. Anyway, on the on the news of Ignite. So first of all, the number one resource to have a look on is the Book of News. So this is a good thing which we are started doing a while back for all of the conferences, because there's so many announcements, so that there's a one collected way of actually having listed all of the different things which were basically announced last week, and calling out Azure stuff, calling out all of the different things. Table of content is already huge, so there's basically a lot of features. Let me scroll down. No,
it's already that. It's like you have all of it already. Yeah.
Yeah, and for explicitly on Microsoft 365, a lot of big announcements. Of course, there's a smaller set of things as well, so which are not necessarily all listed in here, but really cool stuff as well. Good. And then related on the other news, we had the kind of the in quotes the primary blog post from Jared Spataro related on Microsoft 365 in Ignite. So what's available, what is the new features and all of that, which is referring then to specific smaller blog posts. And here we're, for example, calling out the Microsoft 365 app. So which hopefully will bring more clarity on what's where, because again, Teams is not technically Office, but then Word and Excel are. So I guess that will clarify a bit on the terminology.
Teams is also
maybe.
part of the M365 app, right?
Yeah,
Teams
which
is a separate thing.
Yeah. So yeah, it's we'll see. And a lot of stuff on the announcements, of course, new improvements and features in the Microsoft Teams side. Microsoft Places was announced as well. A cool thing, a teaser. I don't know why the video isn't actually loading, but the teaser on what's coming in the future. So that's basically a application designed for hybrid work, so enabling people to check in and go there and see the floor plans and all of that stuff. So it's actually really cool.
Where everybody on the team is when across the week, right?
Yes.
So
yes,
when people
absolutely.
are at home, when they are in the office, and so forth, so that you can connect with each other more easily.
Yep. And a lot of other announcements there as well. We also talked about that the Loop app is in private preview, and there's an updated demo on that, so you can find your different loops from one location and create those loops. Already today, you can do this in Office.com or in Microsoft 365 app, or as part of your Teams engagement and Outlook, and pretty soon in other areas as well. But it's basically then aggregating all of that in one location. A lot of other cool things. We announced also Microsoft Syntex, which is the artificial intelligence machine learning engine to manage documents in scale. So it's based on the SharePoint Syntex, which is now then rebranded as Microsoft Syntex as the content management engine and the computer, whatever, artificial intelligence dealing with all of the content. How do you say that in a fancy way?
It's not putting me on the spot at all, right? So it's basically Microsoft Syntex gives you the AI-powered way to create documents and manage manage in your org.
Yeah,
right?
and analyze
so it gives you the ability to recognize document, recognize building blocks, basically automates working with docs.
Yep. And what was actually cool about the Syntex also, it has the signature. So there's a native e-signature now in Microsoft 365 integrated. And you can still keep on using the other e-signature providers like Adobe and whoever we have. What else? DocuSign and so on. Yeah, absolutely. So and a lot of announcements in Aviva and other areas. I know.
10 minutes on the first
I know. But this is the basically main. And then we had the specific article for Microsoft Syntex. So we're not going to deep dive on that one, but that's good to get called out.
That.
Yep. There was a lot of blog posts from the Microsoft Teams blog announcements and basically summarizing things. We talked about the mesh avatars. That was actually day before Ignite, we announced that we'd have a partnership with Meta related on the avatars, and there's additional improvements in here as well. We also had was it 9 or 8 blog posts related on Microsoft Viva, the announcements in here. So a lot of new features and capabilities in Viva side as well. And then on the developer blog, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or so blog posts as well. So a lot of stuff across the different things. We're not going to deep dive all through them. You can have a look on the main scenarios. The main blog post here is the Ignite 2022, Transforming Collaboration with Low-Code and Pro-Code Dev Tools, which is from Ben Summers, and it really walks through all of the different things which are happening in the developer platform, which is really, really cool. Now, we also announced as part of the Ignite the community days, which is basically on top of the thinking of the SharePoint Saturday, which is, of course, would be too narrow from a naming perspective because it's not just about SharePoint, it's about Microsoft 365 all up. And community days is basically the welcome, the front page site where you can go and find all of the different upcoming events hosted by the community, and we as a Microsoft, we sponsor and help this site to exist and then aggregate the information. If you are an event organizer, please subscribe or not add your event in here so that other people can actually find it as well. But a lot of stuff happening within the upcoming months. Really, really cool stuff. Now, then we had AC coming back on the blog post, a bit less happening this week because of the Ignite communication explosion. But AC had a really cool, interesting blog post here.
Exactly, right? So in his article, he talks about scenario that when you build an SPFX and you build web parts, you come across this relatively often. Like you want to have the ability to have dynamic up-downs, and when you change the value in one, that trickles to another, right? So that ability to dynamically pre-fill them, like that comes a lot. So in his article, he goes through what would you need to get that done, as well as including a sample code that just runs and you can grab that and see it in action. So really cool article for something that developers need a lot.
Yeah. And AZ has started doing this as well. There's a separate video related on this article, which is really, really cool. So helps on then finding or capturing the key information also in a video format, not in Miro. I'm just going to click here, so I'll get it out open. There we go. And there's AZ. Cool. Then we had an article from Martin Lindström, who was actually in the show pretty recently. And this is really around talking about the permission management with SharePoint APIs or calls when you're calling things. How do you run applications with the limited SharePoint permissions so you don't always do the full control all? This is an interesting kind of great article, great consideration point as well, because you should not have too many permissions. Now, there are certain APIs which, however, require super high permissions. Unfortunately, it's like something super simple, which really is so frustrating for me, at least, is the site.title and site.description as an example, the web.description. To be able to modify that, you will need to have sites full control, because there's no smaller actual permissions unless you're doing the selected sites, and then that's one way of actually scoping things down. But really great blog post and explaining how things are actually working and how you can control things using then the BMP PowerShell or CLI. So awesome stuff. Then we had an announcement from the BMP.js team. They had a 3.8 version out. And that's obviously referring all of the different details in the change blog in the GitHub. BMP.js is by far, I would say, the most widely used SDK in SharePoint Framework Solutions to get access on information, because it is really widely used. It's just to use it is out of this world. So thank you, Julie, on that one. On Paolo, who was the visitor today, he had a episode 226, extending user and devices with Microsoft Graph and extension attributes. What's extension attributes, Waldek?
So imagine that you want to store additional information about a user or a device. Well, sure. I mean, you could spin up your own storage and all of that, but then you need to maintain that, back up it, have a restore strategy and all that. Or you can take the easy route and store it on Graph, right? So there are 15 extension attributes that you can use to store additional info about devices and users. And that's really cool because that gives you a no cost place to store additional info about objects in the graph. So it's really cool and an easy way to get more info in your org.
Yep, absolutely, really cool stuff. And like I said, they exist already. There's no cost related on them. You can just start using the information and store that. For example, in the user level, if you have something, let's say HR data, which you want to store to be easily available for all of the apps, you can just replicate that there. Using a sync service or whatever, and then you can associate how when you sync stuff. Anyway,
HR data that might be sensitive because there's no
depends on the data. Yeah, absolutely.
Specific permission, so you might or might not be able to use it depending on what you want to store. So
absolutely. But cool stuff. Thank you, Paolo, on that one. Then April Dunham had a 1 minute and 51 second, 1 minute 51 seconds long an update on what is the favorite announcements related on Power Platform. So really cool stuff. Thank you, April, on that one. It's cool to say the TikTok here. So it's we're getting the stuff to TikTok. Yay!
We're everywhere. Yes.
And then the Message Center show had the episode 257, which basically talks about all of the different announcements and changes within the last week related on what has been shared by Microsoft related on upcoming features. So Message Center is basically a tenant admin inbox for Microsoft to tell what's coming and what's happening, and then the guys are always going through what are the new things and what does it actually mean in practice. So really great show as well. Cool. That's it. So long, and thanks for all the fish. Cheers. No. Thank you, Paolo, one more time joining us on today. And I guess we went through the weekly plans, we went through things. I guess that's it then. We'll be back with another PnP Weekly within a week. Please remember hashtag PnP Weekly. We are available in the video and in the podcast format. Cheers. Bye-bye, Waldek.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.